The house was quiet, eerily so. It always was these days. Once, the walls had echoed with the chaos of children, the endless demands for attention, the slammed doors, and the vibrant chatter over meals. Then, one by one, they'd left, first for university, then to build their own families. Now, it was just the two of us again, a symmetry of beginnings and endings. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the faint hum of the refrigerator down the hall. My Bible sat on the nightstand, its leather-bound cover gleaming under the dim light of the bedside lamp. I had read a chapter before settling in, a ritual that brought me comfort even as loneliness tried to settle in my bones. God was constant. My faith was constant. Samuel and I were constant, or so I thought. The sound of the bedroom door creaking open pulled me from my thoughts. I turned my head slightly, squinting against the shadows. Samuel stood in the doorway, his frame backlit by the faint glow from the hallway. "Is everything all right?" I asked, my voice soft, cautious. It was unusual for him to be up this late. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he closed the door gently behind him and crossed the room, his bare feet padding softly on the carpet. He was dressed in his usual night attire, a loose t-shirt and faded shorts, but there was something about the way he moved, deliberate yet hesitant, that made my chest tighten. "Esther," he said finally, sitting on the edge of the bed. He didn't meet my eyes, instead fiddling with the edge of the blanket. "Yes." I propped myself up on my elbow, trying to read his expression in the dim light. He exhaled deeply, a sound heavy with unspoken words. "Do you ever think about us? About what we used to have?" The question caught me off guard. "What do you mean?" He looked up then, his eyes searching mine. "I mean, the closeness. The way we used to talk, laugh, share everything." A lump formed in my throat. "Samuel, we've been married for 32 years. Life changes. We change. It doesn't mean that we stop being man and wife," he interrupted, his voice soft but firm. I blinked, unsure of how to respond. The truth was, I had noticed the distance between us, the way we had settled into a routine that felt more like companionship than marriage. But wasn't that normal at our age? Weren't we supposed to outgrow the passions of youth and embrace the calm of later years? He reached for my hand then, his touch warm and steady. "Esther, I miss you." The vulnerability in his voice broke something inside me. I didn't know what to say, so I simply squeezed his hand in response. For a moment, we sat in silence, the weight of his words hanging between us. Then, he shifted closer, his other hand brushing a stray strand of hair from my face. "I want to feel that closeness again," he murmured, his breath warm against my skin. My heart raced, a mix of confusion and anticipation flooding my senses. "Samuel, what are you?" "Shush," he whispered, his lips grazing my forehead. I froze, unsure of what was happening. It had been years, decades, perhaps since we had been intimate in any meaningful way. Our faith had always guided us, setting boundaries and expectations for what was proper and holy. We had raised our children with those same principles, teaching them to honor God in all things. But now, here we were, two aging bodies in the dim glow of a bedside lamp, teetering on the edge of something that felt forbidden and yet achingly human. "Do you trust me?" he asked, his voice barely audible. I nodded, though my mind swirled with questions. Slowly, he began to trace a path of kisses along my face, my cheeks, my jawline, the corner of my mouth. His touch was tentative, as if testing the waters, waiting for permission. My breath hitched as his hands slid to my shoulders, then lower, the fabric of my nightgown rustling softly. "Samuel," my voice was a whisper, half protest, half plea. "I want to love you," he said, his words trembling with sincerity. "In every way." The realization of what he meant hit me like a wave, both exhilarating and terrifying. This wasn't just about rekindling the physical aspect of our marriage, it was about exploring a depth of intimacy we had always shied away from, restrained by the teachings of our faith and the weight of societal expectations. I wanted to pull away, to remind him of who we were, devout Christians, parents, grandparents. But another part of me, buried beneath years of self-denial, ached to stay, to let go, to experience what it meant to be holy and unapologetically loved. "Are you sure?" I asked, my voice barely audible. He met my gaze, his eyes shining with a mix of desire and vulnerability. "I've never been more sure of anything in my life." Samuel's lips brushed mine, a kiss so soft and deliberate it sent shivers coursing through me. For a moment, I stayed still, suspended in the tension between reluctance and yearning. Then, as if some dam within me broke, I found myself kissing him back. Tentatively at first, then with a growing intensity that surprised us both. We had shared many kisses in our 3 decades of marriage, on wedding anniversaries, at family gatherings, after church services, but this was different. This was raw, unfiltered, and free of the constraints that had defined our relationship for so long. His hands slid along my sides, his touch reverent, almost hesitant. "Esther," he murmured, pulling back slightly to look into my eyes. "You're beautiful." I laughed softly, the sound tinged with disbelief. "At 55? He smiled, a boyish grin that made my heart flutter. "At any age. Always." His words melted away the insecurities I had carried for years about my body, my aging skin, the stretch marks and laugh lines that told the story of my life. In that moment, I felt seen, cherished in a way I hadn't thought possible anymore. Samuel shifted, his hands moving to my legs, lifting the hem of my nightgown. My breath hitched, the gesture both thrilling and unnerving. "Samuel. Trust me," he whispered again, his voice steady. I nodded, surrendering to the moment, to him, to us. What followed was a dance of discovery, a careful unraveling of boundaries we had once believed to be immovable. His touch was gentle yet insistent, his lips tracing a path along my thighs, my abdomen, places he had never explored with such intentionality before. When his mouth finally found me, I gasped, my body arching involuntarily. The sensation was unlike anything I had ever experienced, intense, overwhelming, and achingly tender. For a moment, I wanted to stop him, to pull back into the safety of what was familiar and acceptable. But then he looked up at me, his eyes filled with a love so profound it made my chest tighten. "You deserve this," he said softly, his voice trembling. Tears welled in my eyes as I reached for his hand, intertwining my fingers with his. "I didn't know," I began, my words faltering. "I didn't know it could feel like this." He smiled, pressing a kiss to my inner thigh before moving back up to meet my gaze. "Neither did I." We lay tangled together afterward, the room filled with the scent of sweat and something else, something sacred. The silence between us was comfortable, a quiet acknowledgement of the boundaries we had crossed and the love we had rediscovered. "Do you think God will judge us for this?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Samuel turned to me, his expression thoughtful. I don't know, he admitted. But I do know that love, real, selfless love, is a gift. And tonight, I felt like we honored that gift in a way we never have before. I nodded, his words resonating deep within me. For the first time in years, I felt whole, complete in a way that had nothing to do with religion or obligation and everything to do with the man lying beside me. As I drifted off to sleep, his arms wrapped around me, I couldn't help but smile. We had spent years hiding from ourselves, from each other, from the parts of our love that felt too vulnerable to face. But tonight, we had stepped into the unknown and found something beautiful waiting for us. Please like and subscribe to this channel for more stories like this.